Awesome. So after some technical difficulties, we got it all squared away. Want to welcome everybody to the uh, Kentucky Home and Garden Show and my presentation on art and twisted luck gardening, Mother Nature's way of worm castings, compost, and extracts. So just to kind of give you guys a brief overview of what we do, we take horse manure from our farm, mix it with the shavings and the bedding and all of that stuff that we have, any excess hay that might have been spoiled in the stall, and we take it out, compost it down, and make it into a nutrient-rich compost. We go through a thermophilic process to heat that compost up. It has to reach at least 145 degrees for excess of 15 days. Through that process, I have thermometers throughout the pile so that I can monitor the temperature, make sure that it is staying within that range that it needs to. And as it starts to drop in temperature, that is telling me that the microbes inside of that pile are starting to die off because it's getting not got enough oxygen or moisture in there. So what I'll do is if it hasn't rained or it's not wet, then I will water the pile and then I will turn the pile, mixing that all up so that everything that's on the outside goes on the inside, things on the inside go on the outside. So by putting that air in, putting that moisture back into it, it will then elevate that temperature back up, and we continue the process on. It has to be there for at least 15 days within that temperature range. So then I can start letting it cool off. I continue to turn it a little bit just to keep that process going a little longer. And as you can see in the pile there, it's a little harder to see on that screen than it is mine, but the stuff at that end is a lot darker, richer look. This end, that'd be closer to me right now, that's the freshest end of the pile. So as it finishes at the other end, then I take it from the pile and put it into the finished pile. It sits there until it's completed at that point, but until it's sold, it sits in the ready to go pile. And then we just carry on and just keep going. I have 19 stalls to pick every day, so that's why my pile looks like that. But so if you don't go through that process and you don't go through that thermophilic process, you're risking the amount of weed seeds, pathogens, any of those kind of things that can carry on through the compost or through the manure, anything that you're composting, whether that's vegetable scraps, things like that. As it breaks down, bacteria and those kind of things do grow on it. The thermophilic process heats it up to kill off those bad pathogens, keeping the good microbes, the good bacteria, the good fungi, that they're going through the process to break them down, and that's what we're doing. So that's why we have to go through that thermophilic process to heat it up and keep it at that right temperature. So then, once it does get, and I'll go back one slide here. Once it does get almost to the end, or like right in there, I then feed it to the worms. It has to be at least 90% complete before I will feed it to the worms. It is already broken down very well. It's in its completing stages. It's just in the cool-off stage. So that's when I introduce it to the worms and feed them, and then they continue to break it down into a very, very rich microbe, bacteria, fungal soil amendment, basically. The worm castings then go, and we have a continuous flow bin. So what that means is I feed them on the top. On the bottom of the bin is a grate system that I take and harvest off the bottom. So it's a continuous, that's why they call it a continuous flow. Feed them on the top, harvest off the bottom, and you carry on. The worms will stay within the top 4 to 6 inches of that, because that's where their food source is. They're not going to go down in where they've already cleared all that food out, because that at the end is just their castings, so they're not really going to go down, digging down into there, but they'll stay up at the top. Worms will stay at a ambient population. They will self-control, so they won't overpopulate themselves to where they cannot sustain. So if I am gone for an extended amount of time and they don't have enough food, they will self-regulate. The older ones will not eat, they'll let the younger ones eat and they'll die off, and then the young ones will carry on through. It kind of works really good that way, but it can also be a hindrance if I don't keep them fed. I lose my population. So I have to keep them fed, keep them going. If I roll back the plastic sheeting that I have on top to keep the moisture in, you'll see them all. I mean, it's just a massive worms through there, and they will head out because they don't like the light burning out in. Worms are a hermaphrodite, so they have both the male and female reproductive, but it still takes two to tango. So what they do is you see on the worms that fat part on their back, that's called a saddle. That's the reproduction part, and they basically intertwine with each other like a snake would, and through that process they're creating a mucus, and as they separate away, then that mucus comes together at the point and will harden, and that is called a cocoon. There's anywhere, average around three baby worms inside of that cocoon. That cocoon can then stay dormant for years and years and years until the conditions are right for it to hatch. So as we remove the castings off the bottom, we have to sift it so that there's any mulch, any rocks or something that might have gotten into the compost as I'm turning it and whatnot, or any dirt clods or whatnot, I can sift them out. Then I also have a second screen that it goes through to catch any of the cocoons that might have fallen through, and I put them back on the top to keep all my worms in there and not out the door. So keeping my population up. So the worm castings are the kind of the super soil amendment compared to the compost. So in other terms, it's like a value added product versus the compost. So it has the microbes, the bacteria, and the fungi, like we talked about before, that bring that back into the soil. Right now we have a bunch of dead soil right now because we have introduced so much chemical-based fertilizers, and chemical-based fertilizers are backed in salt, and that's what makes that fertilizer soluble to the plant. The salt also then kills your microbial, your fungi, all of those things. So now we are not only feeding the plant, only the plant, we're killing all the things that naturally allow us to feed the plant, and we're making that plant solely reliant on us and chemical fertilizer companies. So by doing what we're doing, we're putting everything back into the soil, making it a living soil the way Mother Nature intended. I've told some of you at the booth that, out in Mother Nature, there's not a bunch of little leprechauns out there spreading fertilizer everywhere, granulated fertilizer everywhere to feed the forests. We don't have that. Mother Nature has her own way of doing things, and so that's what we're trying to do, is bring that back. We're trying to bring those microbes, all those good bacteria, fungi, all that stuff back into the soil. And what happens is the plant sends out an enzyme or a signal to the soil saying, I need this, I need X, Y, and Z. And every one of those microbes, bacteria, fungi, all those things have a specific role. So some go get nitrogen, some go get phosphorus, some go get zinc, magnesium, all the trace elements, they all have their own role. And there is an underground interstate system, basically. And it signals it out, those things go get it, have it, and bring it back in. Carbon, nitrogen, all those things. There is a ton of carbon in the ground already that can be then transformed into nitrogen for the plant through those systems. But if we don't have those microbes, bacteria, and fungi in the soil, we have no bridge. So the plant cannot absorb those nutrients from the ground if we don't have those microbes to do the function that they're at. So there is a gap. So these things build the bridge to the gap from the nutrients to the plant as Mother Nature had intended. So just some of the benefits. These are some pictures of different trials and studies that have been done. Here we have some corn that was planted along the edge of they dug down so you can see the soil layers. On the left is just what has naturally been done over time with chemical fertilizers or absolutely nothing in the soil. You see that it's very brown and very not nutrient dense. There's no nutrients in that soil. It's pretty dead. The one on the right is very dark, very black. The soil nutrient level is very deep. See how far down it goes, that it is still black and nutrient dense, and you can see the difference in the corn, how well it grows. In just a minute we'll look at the root systems and how that helps everything out. So this was a turf experiment that was done. They made 2 raised beds and laid sod down in that raised bed, and on one of them they sprayed it with chemical-based liquid fertilizer, and the other one they sprayed it with our worm castings extract, and it's a liquid, and so they watered it each week with those 2 different things. So one of them only had 1 inch of root growth after 6 weeks, and one of them had 26 inches of root growth. And I'm sure that you know which one was which. So the one on the far side was the chemical-based fertilizer, and the one closest to me was the extra. So you got to think about, if you have 26 inches of root growth, how much water intake that plant now has the ability to take up. How much nutrients are available to that plant that one next to it doesn't have the opportunity to even touch. The roots don't go down there. They're not even able to access it. So having something that is not only natural, it has no chemicals to it, and we're able to produce a root system that is hundreds of times greater than what the chemical-based fertilizers are able to do, it's a no-brainer. You know, then you think, okay, so that plant now has all that ability to go down. Now that it's less susceptible to drought. It is a much stronger plant, so any disease, any pest pressure, you know, if you're doing this to your pasture lands, the amount of animals that are able to graze that land, because now it has the ability to regenerate itself and grow back quicker. We're able to rotate pastures faster. We can put more cattle, more horses, more sheep per acre, because the plant now has the ability to grow stronger and bigger and better, and it is also more nutrient dense. So going back to our vegetables, things that we eat, a tomato, an ear of corn that is grown in a nutrient dense soil is now going to be more nutrient dense itself. So an ear of corn that you grow through our system versus an ear of corn that you get from the supermarket, the value of that ear of corn that you grew with worm castings and compost or compost extract is now like eating 2 or 3 ears of corn from the grocery store. So you don't have to necessarily eat as much of the food because you're getting full from a more nutrient-dense food. So how do we feed an ever-growing population? Well, it's not by producing more. We can produce more and more and more and more. That's fine, but if it doesn't have any nutrients to it, then what's the point? You might as well eat a piece of cardboard. It just isn't any good for you. But if you can produce a food that is highly nutrient dense, then that is going to be able to feed more people by producing something that is higher value of nutrients to nourishes your body. You only have to eat 1 tomato instead of eating 10 to get what nutrient you need. So, you think about your corn, your oats, your grain crops that can then be fed in mass to people, rice, all those kind of things. Not everybody eats tomatoes, but so those different things that you can mass produce, like commercial farmers are able to do. Now we're able to give them a system that they can produce, still get their yields up and maintain the same yields that they're doing, but now it's more nutrient dense. So now they don't have to have, each person doesn't need 100 bushels of wheat to sustain themselves. Now they might only need 75 or 60 or something like that to produce them. So we're able to now feed more people with less food. So this is another example of some tests that were done. On the far side there are potatoes that were planted. One had the worm castings and the extract in it, and one of them did not. You can kind of see the difference there. The plants were very young when they were pulled up, so to kind of give you an example, it wasn't fully finished and done. But there are more potatoes, more roots on the far side, and more leaf structure, more vigorous plant on our system. And then the Nashville lawn example, this gentleman had sprayed the extract on the yard and went back to do the neighbor's yard and didn't realize that he forgot that was his yard that he had done, and he's like, dang, that looked really good. So then he remembered, oh, that was one that I did, so he asked if he could take some pictures of it. But you can tell the difference between the yard that he did versus the yard that he didn't do. See how pale green that one is, and how dark and lush green that second one is. And in the second picture over there, where those are stepping stones, but closer to the angle of the picture, there used to be dog urine spots all throughout the yard. And all he did was spray it in and revitalize the soil, made the grass come back to life, and was able to grow and eliminate those grass urine spots from the dogs. So just some different avenues, different things, different ways that you can do it. If the plant, if it has a root, this stuff will work. So, I tell people as you're planting, you want to plant it with the plant. It will feed weeds too. You know what I'm saying? So you don't want to feed the weeds. Or, in your garden area, you want to feed the plant that you're trying to grow. So we plant it with the wall in the row with the plant. I give you guys the example of a tomato plant and lettuce. The tomato plant is going to be there for the long haul. It's going to be there all through the season, basically, and the lettuce is a short-term crop, right? Lettuce, the way that we do it is we put our compost down, then we make the row and make it just a smidge deeper, and put a layer of worm castings down in that hole, in that row, plant the seeds, cover it up, and you're done. go for the entirety of the life of that plant. The tomato side, you're digging the hole, you're putting a cup of worm castings in, you're planting that plant, and about halfway through the season, you then top dress again with another cup of worm castings, and that's it. My garden, that is all that I do. I put compost down, put the worm castings in with according to what I just described there, and that's it. My tomato plants were, chest high. I produced 3 times the amount of tomatoes off of those plants. I did a test run, and some on this side that had it, and some on that side that didn't. The ones that didn't were only, a couple, foot or 2 tall, whereas the other tomato plants were over 4 foot tall. So the question was, can you use your worm castings for your starts? And yes, you mix it like as you're in the greenhouse or whatnot, as you're growing your plants to put into the garden. Absolutely, mix it in with your starting mix, and it does a wonder job because you're growing those roots to be out, in excess. So you're going to get roots that look like that. So when you start, you transplant them then into your soil, you have it leg up already because you're growing a better plant, and it will be less susceptible to the stress of transplanting them as well. So, does anybody else have any questions? Yeah, more?
You've got your casting. What process do you do to get it to a liquid?
Okay, so the question was, how do you get the worm castings then to a liquid form? So there's 2 different ways. You make either an extract or a tea, and there's benefits to both and there's cons to both. So you still brew the tea and the extract in some ways very similar. So you're taking the worm castings and putting it into a bag that has 400 micrometers or less to be able to get the microbes through it, but not the actual castings, because we're trying to break off. It's a huge tea bag. Exactly. So what we're doing is we're trying to break free those microbes, those fungal hyphae and all those things away from the worm castings into the liquid. The difference between extract and tea is that the tea, you feed it with like a molasses base or some kind of a sugar base, because what you're trying to do is blow up the population. It makes them reproduce really fast because there's a lot of food there. It's the molasses, it's the sugar from the molasses, yes. It's making them, you're feeding them, they have a lot of food sources, so they reproduce really fast. Problem with that, very, very short shelf life. So, because if you think about it, you're brewing it in a 5-gallon bucket or a 55-gallon bucket, depending on the amount that you need. So, if you have a 5-gallon bucket and you blow up that population, you have a bunch of population in an itty-bitty living space, right? So, really quickly, they run out of oxygen, they run out of food, and they die off in mass very quickly. So you need to use it pretty quick. Whereas the extract has more of like a 7-day lifespan, shelf life span. So basically you're pulling those microbes off of the worm castings, and then they're in that liquid in the water, and they have all of this space to roam around. So they have much more time to get their food source from whatever's in the soil that came through with it, and they can survive for a lot longer because there's less competition, right? So I prefer to go with the extract way so that I can make it and have it and then be able to get it to the customer. They can have it and then use it. Now, like with everything, day 1 has a much higher population than day 7, right? Because in time, things are going to die off in that liquid. So we aerate it a little bit as we go, like as I brew the extract and have it sitting there, I keep a bubbler in it to keep the air flowing to help keep that population up. I do not feed it. I could possibly feed it after the fact later on to help make that population come back up a little bit if I see that I'm going to need to extend the life of it a little longer past those 7 days. So otherwise, I just do the extract because it's a much simpler process and a longer shelf life for that product. That way I can brew it, get it to your hands, and you can use it before it goes wet or dies out, and then you're just left with a bunch of muddy water. So we're located in Jackson, Tennessee, and then I also do different local delivery drop-off points. So I go to Memphis quite a bit. I come up here to Murray area. We get your email address and send out an email saying, hey, I'm going to be in this area at this time, at this location. This is the products that we have available, and tell me what you need, pre-order it so I have it ready to go for you, bring it up here, and we have a drop-off spot. So that's how we can also do that extract, is I can brew it ahead of time. I can say I'm going to be here on a Saturday, Friday I'll brew it up, get it ready to go, Saturday morning hit the road, and be ready to go, and it's still good for you through the weekend into the first of the week to be able to use on your vegetable crop or your yard or whatever root-based plant you have that needs a little bit of help. So. Sure. So the question was, do I use other fertilizers to supplement some of the needs? Added in there was the fact that some fertilizers are for acidic loving plants versus non-acidic loving plants, all-purpose stuff, that kind of thing. The answer to that question is no, I do not. I layer my compost down, and I plant in that, and then put the worm castings in the hole or the row as described before, and that's all that I do for my entire garden, and that's it. So if it's acidic loving or something like that, say you're doing blueberries or something like that, you might need to supplement a little bit, but I wouldn't mess with it a whole lot and try to get something that's very natural, nothing chemical based, no salts, no anything like that, so that you're not killing off, you're not, shooting yourself in the foot, for lack of better terms, with what you're doing in the natural sense of the worm castings and the compost. So definitely watch what's read to it for sure. And just because it says all natural or organic or something like that, there's a lot of loopholes in the system. So just do your due diligence and make sure that, because you can find some natural things that do elevate your pH, so you can adjust your pH that way as well. So, yeah, worm castings and compost are typically very neutral on the pH scale. Your microbes and bacteria and the fungi that are going out and getting the things that the plant is asking for, that will help supplement that. So the plant says, I need something in this realm, it goes out and gets it and brings it back to the plant. So like blueberries being acidic, they go out and get the things that would help that plant, and you wouldn't necessarily have to supplement. If you see the plant isn't, is needing a little extra, then that's when I would supplement something. That was it for my slides. So, but any other questions? Okay, so the question was how big of the packaging do I supply? So I have, as far as the worm castings, I have a 2.5 gallon bag, and I have a 5 gallon bag as far as the compost, I have 50-pound bags, and then I also do bulk, where if you come to the farm or whatnot, I can load you with the tractor for the bulk compost. I do also sell the worm castings in bulk, and that's by the pound, X amount. How does a newcomer decide how much they need to get started? I always tell people to go shoot high, and then you can use it in other aspects, you know, through your yard and whatnot, if not. And then also, as long as you keep it moist and keep it from freezing, but keep it, you know, kind of in a cool, dark place, but keep it moist, but don't let it freeze. Way there. But as long as you keep that going, the microbial count will stay up, and you'll be safe. So there's been, you know, you've been able to keep it for a year or so, and it's still be good as long as you keep it moist and keep it going. So you should be good. Yeah. And then beans that were close enough, and I make those delivery runs. If you do run out, you always have the opportunity to reach out and say, hey, I need some more, and we can get you some. I do ship it anywhere in the lower 48, so I can ship it out to anybody wherever it needs to be. So. So the question was, what kind of worms do we use? We use red wigglers. So there are 7,000 breeds of worms in the world. There are only 6 that are composting worms. So you have, you know, like the night crawlers or the worms that you see after it rains. Those aren't the worms that we're using. They're ones that go dig down. Yeah. No, you want they're actually very small and very thin. The reason being is they are top dwellers. They're not digging down. They're going to stay in the top 4 to 6 inches of the soil, and they're breaking down any organic matter that is out there. So they're not the ones that are going to go digging deep. They stay at the top. The earthworms that dig deep are the ones that take what the composting worms produce. They go up, they go down. The composting worms stay at the top, do their due diligence in breaking down the organic matter into humus, not the kind that we put on the chips, but humus that is good for the soil. But then those night crawlers that dig deep, they come up to the surface, gather, and go back down. So it's Mother Nature's way of basically plowing the soil for us so we don't have to. Does anybody else have any questions? No? Well, I appreciate everybody coming and attending. I know that it was a little bit late getting started because of the technical difficulties, but I do appreciate you. You guys come to the booth and get my card. We do have an email sign up, so keep up with everything. We have a Facebook page, all those good things, and we do definitely appreciate everybody's feedback. Any kind of questions that y'all have, please reach out and ask me. I'm just a phone call away or an email away, and I'm happy to answer and help you guys any way I can. We're trying to build the soil, build everything back to the way Mother Nature intended to. So any way I can help do that, I'm more than happy to do so and help you guys in your journey forward. So appreciate you guys.